Welcome.
You are watching Line Screw 1. Well, hello tubers. Hope you're doing well wherever you are in this crazy YouTube universe. Today we're going to take you along on a road trip. Yes, a road trip. I'm moving and grooving, and I figured I would take you along on a road trip. I love the road trips. I'm sure millions of you do road trips. Over my life, I've done some really good road trips. Off the top of my head, some of the best road trips that you gotta do is you gotta hit the Autobahn in Germany. Been there, done that. Gotta do it at least once in your life. Another great road trip, when you go to Maui, take the road to Hana. You know, on that northern eastern section of Maui. Beautiful, amazing road trip out to Hana. Gotta do it. But if you're in the west here, like I am in British Columbia, you gotta do the Fraser Canyon. Now, if you're in Vancouver and you're heading to Calgary, maybe you're heading north to the Yukon or Alaska, well, don't take a different route. Take the actual Fraser Canyon. Don't take the Coquihalla. I know everybody loves the Coquihalla. That was built, I don't know, when I was maybe in my early 20s. It kind of sped up some of the traffic into the interior. It kind of created basically an Autobahn through the forest with a higher speed limit, with all sorts of fencing so that the animals couldn't get on the freeway. And that kind of diverted a lot of the traffic off of Highway number 1, which is Canada's major transcontinental road, the Highway number 1, we call it. You know, Trans-Canada. You can go from Victoria, British Columbia on the west, all the way to St. John's, Newfoundland in the east. Very long highway, probably one of the longest highways in the world. Not the longest, I'm pretty sure there's longer roads in Siberia or in Russia, but it is definitely one of the longest highways on the planet. And I've driven most of it, not all of it, but my favorite here in the west is the Fraser Canyon section. Now, the reason it's called the Fraser Canyon is because it's named after Simon Fraser, one of the early explorers. The river Fraser is named after him, and that is the river that runs through the Fraser Canyon, obviously. And part of the reason it's interesting and a nice little drive is it's only, I guess the Fraser Canyon starts about an hour and a half from Vancouver, right around where the old Fort Yale used to exist. It's no longer a fort, it's just a small unincorporated community called Yale, and that's where this video started today. So we're going to take you north. We're proceeding north up the Trans-Canada, north through the Fraser Canyon, and you're going to see all sorts of interesting sights. A few things you want to keep in mind as you're watching this crazy video is that it's an engineering feat. Back in the 19th century, this was just a trail where prospectors and I guess settlers would occasionally traverse up, and a few people made the old Caribou Road, and it was pretty rugged and very remote. Of course, later, towards the end of the 19th century, we finally got a coast-to-coast railroad, just like the people in the USA. You guys finally punched in a railroad that was coast-to-coast. Well, we did the same thing too, but part of the cost of doing so is that we had to pay for all this with a very small population, and we still continue to pay for a large infrastructure of really tough habitat for, you know, building railroads and tunnels and basic infrastructure like roads. And when you don't have a lot of taxpayers to pay for it, that is one, I'm not saying it's all of it, but it's one of the many reasons why Canada is still to this day at a very expensive place to live, because we are the second largest country on planet Earth, and we have like less people than California. And years ago we had even less people. But you're going to learn a few things, and you're going to see a few interesting things about how this beautiful road was punched in. And nowadays, you know, you can just jump into your car and cruise through it, even in the winter, even when the weather's bad. You know, they do plow it. It can be a bit treacherous at times, but I'm going through this here in late April, where the weather's not too bad at all. It's not even raining, so pretty good weather for taking you guys along for the ride here. So anyway, I want you to think, as you're driving along here, you're going to actually see 7 tunnels. I know you've already seen the first one, that's the Yale tunnel, but you're going to see a series of 7 tunnels. They were all built between the late 50s to the early 60s. So the road as you see it now actually is fairly new. It was only completed in its entirety, the way you see it now, in I think 63 or 64. So it's not like this is an old highway. Even though the Caribou Road, where, like I said, the old prospectors and settlers, I think a lot of the roadbed and even the rail bed actually exists on the old Caribou Road Trail, which was built in somewhere around the mid to late 19th century. Now today we have 2 different railroads that run on both sides of the Fraser River through the canyon here. Back when the original railroad was built in the late 19th century, it was built with a workforce of about 9,000 people, of which 6,500 were Asian workers, many of which became Canadians eventually, or were actually Canadians at the time. And these Asian workers, mostly Chinese, they worked very, very hard building this infrastructure, often doing the most dangerous work, and were paid only $1 a day, whereas the white people were paid $1.50 to $2.50 a day. So it was a different world, but they made a large contribution to the infrastructure of moving people, freight, and goods through this neck of the woods, and kind of laid the foundation of cementing British Columbia to the rest of Canada, because Canada has a similar history to the United States, where our west wasn't really secured until we finally got that railroad in, and the roads and the infrastructure and the people, because who knows what could have happened to the west. At one point, of course, even Russia had a settlement where, Alaska was part of Russia. Of course, we know what happened there with the sale of Alaska to the United States, and how finally the border between Alaska and Canada was finally figured out, and a lot of interesting things, because you got to remember, back then nobody really knew what borders were all about and sovereignty was all about, because you could just go somewhere. You could cross the border into the United States and be an American. You could cross the border and become a Canadian. It was a very different world, and the immigrants that came here to work, that's all they wanted to do was work and maybe send a little bit of money back, especially the Chinese workers. And I want to give them a lot of credit for the hard work that they did, and the hundreds of them that died building this. And it's only been recently that we actually are willing to acknowledge and give them the respect that they deserve. The Fraser Canyon is a region of extreme weather. It's a lot more fierce than the local weather in Vancouver, where it's not so hot in the summer and not so cold in the winter. Here in the Fraser Canyon, the weather can be extreme. In the summertime, the daytime high temperatures can sometimes be as hot as Las Vegas in the summertime, and on rare occasion, even hotter. And conversely, in the wintertime, it can be brutally wet and cold. But as we go through this drive here in April, it's a pretty good day, especially when you're traversing the modern highway. And for those of you guys playing along at home, if you're curious about the names of the tunnels that you're going to see, there are 7 of them, as I've mentioned. They are named thus in the direction that we're traveling. You've already seen the Yale Tunnel. We've got the Saddle Rock Tunnel, Sailor Bar, Alexandra, Hell's Gate, Ferriby, and China Bar. The largest of which, the last one you're going to see, is China Bar. It's the longest tunnel that you will see on this journey. Today, traveling upon this highway is really no big deal. Even the cell phone network has been expanded to cover almost all of it now. I remember probably up until about maybe 8 or 10 years ago, not even all of this area even had cell phone coverage. So if you broke down, it's kind of a pain in the butt. You'd have to get somebody to go ahead and get you a tow truck, and maybe they'd come back and get you. But today it's a pretty modern highway, and if you're prepared, if you got snow tires in the winter and you're vehicle is properly maintained in the summer, you shouldn't have much difficulties. But it's that time of year where we're also doing a lot of maintenance because there's a lot of frost heaves and things like that, which only increase the cost to maintain this part of the world, because during the winter, you know, the road is subjected to a lot of freeze and thaw cycles, and you get a lot of potholes. If you noticed along the road, the road can be rough in certain areas, and this is about the time of year where they start patching it all up and getting it ready for summer. And for all the tourists, and many of you guys that are heading up to the Yukon or Alaska, a good number of you will drive this road. So those are just some of my thoughts, just to give you a little bit of background information on this road. I guess I should also throw in, passing along on the left-hand side, there's also a place called Hell's Gate. It's where the Fraser River Gorge kind of narrows, and there's actually a tram that you can take. It's kind of a bit of a tourist trap, but you can take a little tram down and kind of see the river and walk around and do a few things. But we're going to be passing by the Hell's Gate region on the highway. It'll be on your left-hand side at some point here in the video. So, enjoy the ride. Beautiful day just to get out there and do a few things as I travel about. And yes, I'm still heading to other places. Alaska is still coming up on the menu, depending on how I delay my videos. But yeah, I am heading north, just in case you're all wondering. Everybody's asking questions like, hey, how come you're not in the Philippines? How come you're not in Alaska? How come you're not in Las Vegas? Well, in due time, all things shall pass. So enjoy this little travelogue of a video that I threw up today. And in the meantime, folks, stay safe. Keep your wheels in the ground. I'll talk to you soon. Over and out.
you.